And I want to thank the CHC, as well as the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, for issuing a statement very quickly after the current president's executive order on birthright citizenship opposing what he wants to do. And I want to talk about not only that it's un-American, it's unconstitutional, but also the practical effects of that order. If birthright citizenship no longer were the law of the land, then what would happen is approximately 330 million Americans will no longer be recognized as citizens. They'll have to prove it. And guess what? Your driver's license doesn't show you're a citizen. Your Social Security card doesn't show you're a citizen. Your birth certificate will no longer show you're a citizen because it just shows where you were born. You're now going to have to find your parents' birth certificate. What if your parents passed away? You don't know where their birth certificates are. What if you're adopted? What if one of your parents is a citizen and one is not? So all of a sudden, there's going to be this huge burden on millions and millions and millions, in fact, most Americans, who can no longer show their citizens, have to find paperwork to show they are. And then for new births, hospitals will have this incredible burden to find out, hey, are these parents citizens or not? So this executive order is not only going to be burdensome, it is ludicrous and it's unconstitutional.
Thank you. Let me just stress there are other issues as birthright citizenship and TPS and others that are critically important to us. And one other sort of like housekeeping matter is that in the past, the issue of immigration has been discussed without our presence at the table. We intend to change that. We demand that we are at the table when it's being discussed because it impacts our communities disproportionately. So we cannot receive an item of which we have not been part of the discussion. We demand to be at the table in any and all discussions that involve immigration. With that, I give you our CHC Whip, Representative Sylvia Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all my colleagues who have joined us today. As you can see, we're here united, we're here strong, and we're here ready to take the charge and move ahead. We will not be deterred, we will not be stopped, and we will stay the course. And we're going to stay the course and stand with all immigrants, no matter when they got here and where they came from. Slovenia, South Africa, Mexico, you name the country. If they're here, they should be treated with dignity and respect, and there should be a process that is followed. And I think that for me, as the sponsor of the Dream and Promise Act, my priority will always be making sure that dreamers get the pathway to citizenship that they deserve, and that they do it as quickly as possible. I'm heartened by the fact that the president has said that he wants to treat dreamers differently, and he hasn't said how. And that is the question of the day. We know how he's going to treat TPS. We know how he's going to treat people that were born in this country and are citizens. We know how he's going to treat people seeking amnesty, because probably about 6 of the over 50 executive orders that he's signed so far relate to some aspect of immigration, whether it's trade, whether it's vetting, whether it's birthright citizenship. A lot of focus. But we will put as much focus as that and more, because we know we're representing millions and millions of Americans, new Americans across this country. So again, we will not be deterred. And I wanted to just say something about birthright citizenship. I guess it's the old judge in me. You know, I think some people need to just sit down and read the damn Constitution. Because frankly, if you read it, there is just no question. The founders were crystal clear after debates about who can vote and who can be a citizen, who can actually, you know, it's this whole, I want to decide whether or not you're an American and whether or not you can vote, and what, you know, they wanted to get rid of all that. And they simply said, all persons, didn't even use a gender, born, That means you were born in the United States or naturalized in the United States, are citizens of the United States. Any one of you have a question about that? It's pretty simple, right? It's easier than any civics exam or government exam, or hell, it's probably easier than the citizenship exam that is administered to thousands of immigrants. So I don't know how this is even being questioned. The second thing I want to say is, remember, it's an executive order. It's a piece of paper signed by the president. But it doesn't beat the Constitution. The Constitution is the core principles. It is where all other laws emanate from. It doesn't start from his piece of paper and then goes to the Constitution. It's the opposite. The Constitution is there, and all law emanates from there. And this is one that really should be protected, that we will continue to make sure that it is challenged, and I suspect that in the end, it will be held unconstitutional. We need to make sure that we could keep an eye on this. There's so many other topics that we could talk about, and there'll probably be even more executive orders issued as the days go on. But rest assured that the Congressional Hispanic Caucus will keep the eyes on the ball and will always look to making sure that all immigrants are treated with dignity and respect, and that a process and due process is followed. Thank you, and I yield back.
We will now hear from the Vice Chair of Diversity and Inclusion, Representative Joaquin Castro from Texas.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joaquin Castro, proud to represent my hometown of San Antonio, Texas, here in the House of Representatives. And I'd like to remind Donald Trump that the United States became the most powerful, most prosperous nation on earth, not in spite of immigrants, but because of them. The CHC stands united in working to protect dreamers, farm workers, and families, while Republicans tear down what makes us stronger. We're fighting for equity, opportunity, and an economy that works for everyone. Donald Trump and Republican politicians have embarked on a campaign to radically alter American society by stripping away constitutional, legal, and civil rights, ending birthright citizenship, and pushing people into the shadows. On the campaign trail and in his first days in office, President Trump claimed that his administration is launching mass deportation campaigns to get criminals off the street. The vast majority of undocumented immigrants are hardworking people who've paid taxes and contributed to American society, some for decades. President Trump doesn't care about keeping Americans safe from crime. We know this because if he did, he wouldn't have released nearly 1,600 violent criminals who were involved in the January 6th attacks. Vicious, dangerous, uncontrollable attacks, some of them, against police officers with flagpoles, some who smashed their way into the Capitol. President Trump says he's shutting down our border to stop the flow of fentanyl, but he just signed a full and unconditional pardon for a man who created the largest online drug marketplace in the world. We can't be distracted by what he says. Look at what he does. He says he's targeting criminals, but he just removed the restrictions that stopped ICE from conducting raids on schools, on hospitals, and in churches. I would ask you who he believes among those kids is a criminal sitting in a first grade class. Who are the criminals that he's going after in the Catholic Church, in the Presbyterian Church, in the non-denominational churches? Who are those criminals? In the 20th century, mass immigration raids led to the deportation of more than 1 million U.S. citizens, people who got wrapped up in immigration enforcement because of the color of their skin, their last name, or the language that they primarily spoke. To be specific, during these 2 mass deportation campaigns, the kind that he wants to model his policy after, there were between 1 and 2 million Latinos who had every right to be in the United States of America who ended up in Mexico. That is what Donald Trump seeks to repeat. We are going to stand up for families in this country, no matter where they are, whether they're in San Antonio, they're in Florida, Nebraska, California, Chicago, wherever they are. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Again, we stand together. This is a caucus that has members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, members that are part of the Congressional Black Caucus, KPAC, Blue Dogs, New Dems, problem solvers. We got everybody. This is a big tent caucus, but we stand together, and we're going to continue to stand together and take a stronger stand on this issue. With that, I give you the Vice Chair of Communications, Representative Norma Torres.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone, for being here. I stand here today not only as the representative of California's 35th District, but also as an advocate for an issue that defines our country, our values, and also shapes our future. I, too, am an immigrant from Guatemala. We are here to defend dreamers, farm workers, and families. And while Republicans undermine what strengthens us, we are fighting for fairness, opportunity, and an economy that works for everyone. The U.S. is one of the most prosperous nations in the world. Thank you, immigrants, because we are the backbone of our economy. Working tirelessly, starting businesses, paying taxes, and strengthening communities across our country. Yet, recent executive orders calling for mass deportations are nothing more than a political ploy. These policies do nothing to advance our economic growth. They do nothing to strengthen our nation or uphold our American values. Instead, they risk tearing apart families, destabilizing our workforce, and undermining industries that are critical to our economy. Let's talk about the numbers. Immigrants make up 13.9% of the U.S. population, but their economic contributions are extraordinary. In 2019 alone, immigrants-led households paid over $492 billion in federal, state, and local taxes, and wielded a $1.3 trillion in spending power. That is a muscle that the American economy cannot afford to lose. These dollars, they support our schools, infrastructure, small businesses in every corner of our country. Mass deportations will devastate key industries. 73% of farm workers are foreign-born. Immigrants make up over 30% of the construction force. Policies like these would not lead to labor shortages. They would cost our economy hundreds and billions of dollars in lost productivity over the next decade. Not just 4 years, decades. This is not the America we aspire to be. What we need is comprehensive immigration reform. Reform that creates a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants so that they can fully contribute to our American dream. At the same time, we must prioritize investments in smart, effective border security measures to protect our nation and ensure our laws are respected. These are the priorities. They are not exclusive to anyone. These are essential for a balanced and forward-thinking immigration system. These goals are the foundation of a balanced, humane, and forward-looking immigration system. Immigrants are not just part of our past. They are the key to our economic stability. It's time for all of us, mothers and grandmothers, to reject going back to children and mothers and families being held in an ice-cold freezer or separated at the border or in our communities. And I yield back to the chairman.
Yes, we will now hear from our Vice Chair of Policy, Representative Rob Menendez from New Jersey.
Thank you, Chairman. It's great to be with all my colleagues and appreciate everyone coming out. What I think is important as we absorb what this administration is doing is remembering that they're not just policies and executive orders that are targeting this unknown population. They're targeting people in our communities, especially the communities that the folks on this stage represent. These are parents, children, uncles, aunts, who are going to be targeted and impacted by what this administration chooses to do, and why it's so important that we stand together, unified, against these harmful policies. Further, when they're coming into our communities, for our neighbors, for our friends, for our family, they've said that no place is off limit. So think about that. In your church, in your parish, in your community health center, in your children's school, you could have an ICE raid. So it's not just this group of people that's faceless, that's nameless. These are people that we interact with every single day. And they're coming directly into our communities, into the places that are supposed to be sacred and safe for all of us. That's where they're coming. There is no end, there is no limit to their cruelty and to what they seek to do to us. When we think about these stories, we're talking about people who on average have been here for over 15 years. I represent a district where over 40% of the people that live there were born outside the country. I've had interactions already, before Trump's first day in office, where a person who's been here most of his life, whose 2 adult children were born and raised here, and who are American citizens, won't leave his house without one of them. A person who's contributed so much to our communities won't leave his house without one of his children because he's afraid of what could happen if he were to be approached, seized, held in detention by ICE and other federal authorities. So we have a lot of work to do. This group knows the threat that is at our doorstep, but we're not going to be silent. And we're going to fight for our communities. We're going to fight for the people who we call neighbors, and we're going to fight for a future for this country that is reflective of who we really are, when we stand alongside each other, when we believe in each other, because this country has always believed in us. So now it's time for us to pay it back, to pay it forward, to make sure that we move this country in the right direction. So look forward to all the work ahead. Thank you, Chairman.
Estamos aquí para tratar temas de importancia al caucus latino y estamos aquí con el liderato de los miembros de esta bancada demócrata que están interesados en dirigirse a temas de importancia como son los soñadores, los trabajadores agrícolas y mantener nuestras familias unidas. Entendemos que esos son 3 temas de gran importancia donde se ha desarrollado un consenso. También hay otros temas como es la ciudadanía por nacimiento o el TPS, entre otros, pero estos 3 nos han unido como bancada y estamos aquí para apoyarlo y avanzar esa agenda que puede resultar en cambios positivos para nuestra comunidad. With that, I give you Representative Nidia Velázquez from the state of New York.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Espaillat, and thank you to all our colleagues. I think this is a great picture for the American people to see. All of us representing people in our communities are here because we care deeply. I always say that immigrants make America, America. Think about that. Immigrants are the foundation of this country. And we're going to be here to fight back and to make sure that they do not, that our constituents, our immigrants community will not become a political fight. This is about everyone coming together and doing right for this country. And as so many of our members have stated, the economy is going to suffer. You want to talk about inflationary forces? Go and look at farmers that are fighting to find workers, or the construction industry, or the retail industry. I'm the ranking member of the Small Business Committee. Farmers are already reaching out to us. The construction industry is already reaching out to us. And in our communities, our school system, the public school system, school superintendents telling us that absenteeism is on the rise. Think about that nothing is off limit, that rates could go happen in our public schools. You know, that is the point. Cruelty. Cruelty. You gotta be heartless to say publicly that we're gonna send ICE to our school. Heartless. And then to say that crime is on the rise because of immigrants, that we want to make our community safer? Well, while Republicans claim that these destructive deportations are in the name of law and order, they also just released hundreds of violent criminals like Enrique Tario, Stuart Rhodes, and hundreds who were convicted of assaulting police officers on January 6th. Those people were criminally convicted, and Donald Trump didn't care a bit about safer communities when he released those who were convicted of beating the shit out of police officers. So don't come to us and talk about security and safer communities when you do that. Well, Mr. President, convicted felon released 1,600 people. Criminal. So quiero decirle a la comunidad latina, miren este cuadro aquí. Estamos todos los miembros del Congreso para enviarle un mensaje claro al presidente, que estamos unidos y resueltos a exigir que nuestras comunidades se respeten y a entender que cuando están utilizando el argumento del alto crimen, los indocumentados tienen el índice de criminalidad más baja en comparación a otros segmentos de nuestras comunidades. Me da pena cuando muchos tomaron el Kool-Aid de Donald Trump y le creyeron de que simplemente iban detrás de los criminales. No, ellos van detrás de todos los inmigrantes en esta nación. Pero vamos a estar aquí y vamos a exigir de parte del liderato demócrata que nos juntemos colectivamente para luchar por una sociedad mucho más justa y porque se respeten los derechos de los inmigrantes. Como dije al principio, ¿qué sería de los Estados Unidos sin inmigración? Inmigrantes han hecho de este país lo que es. Y aquí estamos para defenderlos. Gracias.
Gracias, Nidia. Again, I know that the narrative has been peddled that we fight amongst each other, we're divided. That is not the case. We have full discussions, democratic discussion internally, just like any other group. But we stand together. And with that, I give you Linda Sanchez, Representative Linda Sanchez from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to all my colleagues who are here to stand up for our constituents and for our communities and ultimately for our country. I'm Congresswoman Linda Sanchez from Southern California, and I am the daughter of immigrants, and I represent many working-class immigrant communities in Los Angeles County, people that are just like my family. Back home, we understand the value of immigrants and the contributions that they make to our society, particularly in the workforce and our economy. Something billionaires President Trump and Elon Musk seem to understand when they need immigrants to run their companies. And just as they rely on immigrant labor, so do average Americans, whether they know it or not, or whether they want to acknowledge it or not, because we have a real acknowledgement problem in this country. From construction to agriculture to healthcare to hospitality, immigrants are the backbone of many industries that keep our economy humming. In fact, immigrants contribute more than $1.6 trillion to our economy, and they pay nearly $600 billion, that's billion with a B, in taxes, nearly 1 in every 6 tax dollars that is collected. Yet despite their contributions, our communities are under attack from President Trump because he sees them as an easy target. Instead of following through on his promise to lower costs for American families, he's reinstating incredibly unpopular policies like family separation, terminating birthright citizenship, and other extreme executive orders. By spouting hateful rhetoric, many immigrants are now living in fear regardless of their legal status. Dreamers are worried that they'll be deported from the only country that they've ever called home. Families are worried that they're going to be torn apart. Children who go to school are afraid that they may come home to an empty house. They are afraid to go to church or even to seek medically necessary care in hospitals where they could be detained and deported thanks to President Trump. And Nydia stated it correctly, it's out of pure malice and cruelty. Workers are afraid to show up to their jobs. And you know what? They're not showing up to the jobs are going to be a huge, huge anchor on our economy. Because again, whether we want to recognize it or not, we depend on their labor. From the farm workers who grow and harvest our crops, if they're not in the fields, what do we think that's going to do to the price of groceries in this country? President Trump ran on a promise that he was going to lower costs, and these policies that he is pursuing are actually going to make costs go up for the average American family. How does deporting hospital and nursing home workers reduce healthcare costs? There is a premier medical research facility that provides care in the LA region, and they depend on dreamers. They have over 500 dreamers that work in their facilities, whether they're radiologists, doctors, nurses, maintenance people, or even people who clean those those hospital rooms. They told me that if those dreamers are deported, that entire health system will collapse. And who is going to pay the cost? Who's going to suffer? The people that they treat. This country, and particularly Los Angeles, was built by immigrants, and we've had no relief to show our community for more than 35 years. I've been in Congress for 23 years, and I've seen us throw money at enforcement. I've seen us increase all kinds of resources at the border, and we have seen zero relief for these immigrant communities, and we need these communities now more than ever. After the recent wildfires in Los Angeles, we're facing a daunting task of trying to rebuild what was leveled. Who's going to rebuild Los Angeles if we're deporting a huge pool of our workforce who are construction workers? What happens when they're deported? What do we think will happen to the cost of housing, which is already expensive enough? Without their skilled labor, the recovery will be much slower and more expensive and take much longer. In California, we value the contributions that immigrants make to our country, and it's time that President Trump and MAGA allies in Washington, D.C. realize that too. We have to acknowledge that immigrants work hard, pay taxes, and are members of our community, and they're absolutely critical for our economy. And with that, I'd like to welcome my fellow Californian, Congressman Juan Vargas, to the mic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Juan Vargas. I represent San Diego, California. I represent the border. That's my district. I want to thank our chairman and all of my colleagues here. On Saturday, I was invited to go to Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in San Diego by the pastor there, Father Scott Santa Rosa, because he was going to take the Holy Eucharist and march it through the community there because so many people in his church are frightened to death, terrified of what's coming. And he asked me to join him, and I did. And I got to march with them, and they would stop every so often, and someone would tell a story. And the stories were heartbreaking. We got back to the church, and at the church they had a service, a prayer service, which was very moving. After that, I stayed and talked to some of the people because they wanted to, and a little girl came up to me, and she's probably about 12 years old, and I have two daughters, myself, my wife, and I, and she asked me, are they going to deport my mom? And I wanted to tell her, like I usually do, reassure my kids and reassure people. I want to tell her, no, they're not going to deport your mom. But I couldn't because they may deport her mom. In fact, they may deport her mom from the church itself. That's why this is so terrifying. And this you hear all over the place. On Sunday, I went to the Mass, the normal church that I go to, the Mission Church, and I heard the same thing once again because they know who I am. They told me, are they going to deport us? Are they going to separate us as a family? I couldn't tell them no because I don't know what's going to happen. What's happening is very sinful. But I know one Republican that's adamantly against this. One Republican. And that's Ronald Reagan. I'm sure that he's up in heaven next to God saying, I don't even recognize this party anymore. He's the one. He's the one that signed Simpson-Mazzoli in 1986. He was always proud of that. He said these people are our neighbors. They take care of our families, our children. We should trust them. And he gave them an opportunity. What a terrible change that we've seen in the GOP, what used to be the grand old party. We see meanness now. But I'm still hopeful that they'll change and come back. I'm hopeful because even they see the injustices when you separate families. And I hope they come back and they understand that our nation is a nation that's good, a nation that welcomes immigrants, a nation where if you work hard, you can do something with your life that's beneficial. So again, I plead to my colleagues on the other side, bring some humanity back to this discussion. Look at these families. Do something positive. Don't follow that road that we know leads to destruction, disruption, and all these other things. Instead, take the good road. And I'm hopeful that they will. Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Our next three members will be Representative Teresa Alejer Fernandez, of course, from the state of New Mexico, as well as Gabe Vasquez, Representative Gabe Vasquez, and Representative Emily Randall.
Muchísimas gracias y buenas tardes. I'm Congresswoman Teresa Alejer Fernandez from the beautiful border state of Nuevo Mexico, and I'm also chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. For the past 3 weeks, Republicans and Trump have attacked immigrants, and I want to talk about how they are putting immigrant women at risk and how they are putting the care for our children, the care for our elderly, and the care for our communities that immigrant women provide at risk. We've heard it earlier that immigrants are key to certain sectors, and they are key to the care economy. Our economy depends on immigrant workers and women showing up so that other women can also go to work. And that becomes a downward spiral when we start deporting the women we depend on. But let me tell you a story. An immigrant woman was beaten so severely by her partner that she ended up in the hospital. And this was work I used to do back when I worked on immigrant issues when I was in California. But we've heard it often and repeated. Bloodied and scared, she was afraid to name her abuser because he had threatened her. If you tell anyone, I'll get you deported. You'll never see your children again. The Trumpian bills that we have passed out of this House and that he has sought and that he has said he will move forward on, those Trumpian bills will give her and other abusers even more power. A simple accusation against her could lead to her detention and deportation even without a conviction or charges. And it isn't hypothetical. And that's why over 200 domestic violence groups have begged Congress, have begged Democrats and Republicans to stop this madness. We already have laws to deport and jail immigrants who commit a crime. And if you really cared about crimes against law enforcement, you would be standing up and denouncing those Trump pardons. How dare they be quiet when the men and people who beat our Capitol Police and law enforcement officers are now being paraded around this Capitol? How dare they say they stand with law enforcement when they have let those violent thugs out of jail? And those are convicted violent thugs. So this is not about safety. This is about fear. They want to have somebody to blame and somebody to fear and something to fear, and that is such a tactic of authoritarianism. That's a tactic that bullies bring. But that tactic is stripping dignity from immigrant women. Republicans are telling women, in essence, we don't care about you. It's all right to beat and bloody you as long as you're an immigrant. And it doesn't matter if you're a dreamer, if you have some legal status, it doesn't matter anymore. They can beat and bloody you, and if you dare fight back, we're going to deport you. Imagine the power they have now given to the bullies. To every immigrant woman and every survivor of abuse, the CHC is there. We see you, we hear you, we stand with you. Te vemos, te escuchamos. Estamos con ustedes. You deserve justice and safety and to live a life free of fear. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus is with you in that battle, even when we can't reassure that small 12-year-old child that it'll be safe for now, but we ain't giving up. We're not. We stand united with you. Muchísimas gracias, Chairman.
Again, dreamers, farm workers, construction workers, hospitality workers, hospital workers, and families. Representative Gabe Vasquez.
Buenas tardes, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. My name is Gabe Vasquez, and I'm a first-generation Mexican-American raised in an immigrant family along the U.S.-Mexico borderlands in my hometown of Las Cruces, El Paso, and Juarez. I've worked in almost every industry in our state, from working at the chili factory in Deming to construction sites, working retail, and paying my way through school. Like many of our families, I faced the challenges and struggles of home ownership, paying down medical debt, and so much more. In a district like mine, where poverty is high and opportunities are limited, people voted for a representative who understands their challenges and works to deliver real results. That's why, as a border Latino Democrat, I was able to win in a Trump district by listening to my constituents, treating every community with respect, and making it less about politics and more about what matters to them in their everyday lives. As a proud member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I believe it's our collective responsibility to move past the divisive rhetoric and work with our colleagues to find the solutions that Americans truly care about. Part of our responsibility is to lead the fight to fix our broken immigration system in a way that holds true to our American values, treats people humanely, strengthens our economy, and keeps our border safe and secure. That's why, like my colleagues, I am deeply concerned about President Trump's executive orders, especially his attack on the 14th Amendment. Doing away with our constitutional rights doesn't just impact immigrants, it impacts all Americans. So sorry, Mr. President, but you can't rewrite the Constitution with the stroke of a pen. Now, back in my district, I've done the work of meeting with immigrant families, ranchers, farm workers, small business owners, faith leaders, and law enforcement agencies. And all they want is the same thing: less posturing and more solutions that deliver for the American people. Tenemos la oportunidad de trabajar con republicanos. Por ejemplo, en la lucha contra los carteles y los coyotes que trafican mujeres y niños, importan drogas y lastiman nuestras comunidades fronterizas. There are opportunities for us to work with Republicans, such as fighting the cartels and coyotes who traffic women and children, provide an endless supply of drugs, and hurt our border communities. That's why I introduced bipartisan bills like the Stop Fentanyl at the Border Act, to provide resources for customs and border protection to make sure that we can crack down on the cartels that are bringing fentanyl into every community in the United States, and the Humane Accountability Act, which ensures that migrant families and their children are kept together and treated with dignity while in custody. But we can't talk about immigration without talking about the economy. Mass deportations will hurt every aspect of our economy and our society. Hardworking immigrants who contribute billions to our economy, to our family farms, to our rural small businesses, and our nation's emerging industries deserve a fair shot at residency and citizenship. Fixing our immigration system is a matter of national food security, shoring up our healthcare system, recruiting our next generation of military service members who will protect our country and have already done so, and so much more. Hispanic families in my district work hard, yet still struggle to afford food, prescription medicine, car insurance, or buy a home. We have to ensure that the labor that they put into our economy allows them to raise healthy families and thrive with legal status. Nuestras comunidades merecen líderes que se enfocan en lograr resultados, no en la política que nos divide. Juntos podemos proteger nuestra frontera, crecer nuestra economía y construir un sistema de inmigración que refleja lo mejor de quienes somos como americanos. Our communities deserve leaders who focus on results, not more ways to divide us. Together, we can secure our border, grow our economy, and build an immigration system that reflects the best of who we are as Americans. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Finally, one of our wonderful new members of the CHC, Representative Emily Randolph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Emily Randall from Washington State, and I am proud to stand united with my colleagues in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus in support of Dreamers, in support of farm workers, in support of families. And I'm proud to stand in support of our communities with the people of Washington. In Washington State, where I was a legislator for the last 6 years, we know that immigrants make our communities stronger. That's why we've expanded our state financial aid programs to Dreamers and immigrants, because we know we cannot reach our workforce goals, our education goals, our economic goals without ensuring that everyone has access to education and opportunity. We know that we're facing a healthcare crisis, and without ensuring that our immigrant communities are safe and that Dreamers are being educated to become nurses and doctors, we will not be able to take care of our aging community, of our sick, of our vulnerable. We know that we have a housing crisis in Washington State, just like across the country. And without ensuring that our immigrant communities are safe, we will not be able to build the housing that we need. And just like everyone in Washington, immigrant families are struggling to afford rent. They are struggling to afford the chance to buy their first homes. And we need to ensure that we are building an economy that is thriving for all of us, from the middle out. I'm proud to be here, standing alongside my colleagues against these dangerous attacks on our immigrant communities, on our neighbors, on our friends, on our fellow churchgoers, on our classmates in school, on our teachers. Because a frightened community does not make our community safer. I've heard stories as I've talked to immigrant activists in our communities of folks who are scared to go to their jobs at fish processing plants in Grays Harbor. They are scared to go to their jobs in the timber industry on the Olympic Peninsula. And they're concerned that there are rumors that ICE is seen at our Kingston ferry terminals. Folks are living in fear, and it is only forcing neighbors to live closed off, to not communicate with each other, to not feel safe to call law enforcement if they're facing abuse or if there's a crime on their street. We stand here united to ensure that everyone in our community is safe. Everyone in our community can trust that the government is looking out for them. Everyone in our community has the access to the tools that they need to build the lives that they dream of. I'm proud to be here with my colleagues, and I'm grateful to all of you for being here with us as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. De nuevo, estamos aquí para apoyar a los soñadores, a los trabajadores agrícolas y también a nuestra familia.